unreadable. Do those slides look okay? I'm currently sharing just page 1 of the chair slides.
They look fine. They scale to the window size here, so
good. Good. And hello, Mark, as well. Hello, everybody.
Hey, Rick, just checking my audio. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you nicely. This appears to be working. What I have to check is... Yes, and Scott is... Oh, I have to work out what this... Oh, I think Scott is in the queue, so if I click...
I wasn't in the queue and I've just said something, but let me go back to being in...
Yeah, sorry, this is going to take a moment for me to work out what I'm doing. So queue, Scott is in the queue, and I click that, and Scott can now say something, I think.
Yeah, I should be able to say something. And I'm also in the video queue if you wanted to test the video.
Click.
And behold.
And behold.
My video is transmitted. All right, I will withdraw.
Behold, yes.
Look at that.
I think I can eject you as well, which is
the magic of electronics.
Amazing. It's almost as though telecommunications works. So I'm keeping an eye on the time. It's 1 minute past, so you don't really need to see me waving around. Do people want video of me looking slightly unshaven, or are they happy with just audio? It's all a matter of bandwidth. I am not vain.
I think audio is fine, actually.
Yeah, in which case I'm going to kill the video because nobody needs to see me, really. But I am here. So shall we make a start? Yeah, why not? Okay, so I've got to work out how to do... Hopefully I can move these slides. Oh, no, I'm being an idiot. I need to actually use the screen I'm sharing. Okay, so hello everybody, welcome to IETF108 virtual GTN session. So I'll just kick off with the agenda. This is just some links to what we've got for today's meeting. So the agenda URL is there. Also, I've included the participation guide for those who are struggling with Meet Echo, how to contribute, etc., etc. There's a link there. And also there's a link for the reporting's issues page in case somebody can see this and not speak, or hear me and not see. There is a reporting's issues page, and hopefully you can follow that link and someone can assist you. Meanwhile, I wish this would actually go in pages. Here is the note well as ever. I'm assuming that has come through in the Meet Echo. Yes, it has. Good. Sorry, I'm having to switch between tabs as I work out what I'm doing. This has not changed to the best of my knowledge, but in case it has, I do suggest you read it. It's the standard IETF note well. The short executive summary is: this is a public meeting. Anything you say is assumed to be released as into the public, so be very careful if you are discussing IPR that you wish to reserve, i.e. don't speak, because you are disclosing it. I am not a lawyer. I thought I would add that as well. So agenda. The agenda doesn't quite add up to our full time, but I've split it into 3 sections, well, 4 sections, including this waffle phase. First 3 sections are covering the 3 major documents that are still in IESG review. So that's the BP-BIS, the BP-SEC, and the TCP-CL version 4. So we are all, as a working group, waiting for resolution to the discuss raised by a couple of the IESG reviewers, in particular Benjamin Kaduk, if I've pronounced that correctly. And I know the authors have actually worked hard to try and address a lot of these discussions. There have been uprevs to the documents. And one thing in the discussion between the chairs and the AD was, given there have been some changes that may or may not be reasonably impactful to the document, we felt it was relevant to get a statement from each of the primary authors of each of these documents, just to say, this is how we've addressed the discusses, and this was the change we made, just to make sure that we have working group consensus on the changes. I imagine we do. The working group list has been quiet, and I think that's a criticism to all of us on the working group for not participating quite as much as we ought to, really. But really, this is a case for the working group just to check that they are happy with the changes that the authors are making to these documents in order to address the discusses. On the counter side of that, I think with my chair hat on, I need to poke our AD Magnus and say, I know you're pursuing the IESG reviewers to try and get them to clear their discusses or do another pass. Can you please put more pressure on them? We need to get some of these addressed. They've been open since February. I know with the coronavirus situation globally, this has been difficult for everyone involved, but it's where this is starting to drag a bit, and it's a bit frustrating for the authors, and it's frustrating for the working group as well. So polite prompt for
more, even try to get feedback or get the feedback out of them. I mean, I think especially it's Ben that's been.
I think it may be Ben as well, but yeah, it's just a polite request, and we'll pursue this after IETF108 when everyone hopefully is full of excitement about getting all the IETF stuff they've committed to doing this week done. So we can poke Benjamin at that point and say, come on, clear it, address it, raise some more comments or whatever. So going back to the agenda, second part is a little bit of new business. So actually, having just written these slides, let me just follow through the slides properly. So before I get into the full breakdown of the agenda, administrivia. So we've got the new Meet ecosystem. It's new to everyone. Please can everyone be a little bit patient, and I am not watching the chat at the moment in case somebody is desperately trying to chat, because I have to keep jumping from tabs. No, I'm not. It's all good. So please be a little bit patient with the chairs and with myself and etc. We also need some minutes taken. Now, in the lovely new MeetEcho interface, there is now a note-taking section, which is the equivalent of Etherpad. In the top right-hand corner of your window, there is a little rectangle with a pencil icon. Can we have a couple of volunteers to... I'm just going to see whether anyone has started yet. No. CodeMD, it's a Markdown-based interactive Etherpad-style editor. Can somebody or many people, and why is it saying offline? DTN. Sorry, I'm staring at what I'm trying to do. Can somebody please have a go at trying to get some minutes taken, because we need a minute taker. So volunteer, please, or just open the CodeMD and start typing. And final point is, when speaking, can you please remember to state your name, just as in an in-person meeting, because there is an audio-only recording being made of this, and not everyone is familiar with everybody's voice. Okay, so completely out of order were all these things. I'm going back to where I was with my agenda discussion, if that's okay with everyone. He says, checking the chat. And the queue, because I don't quite know what I'm doing. Looks good. So, as I said before, the original 3 documents are under IESG review. We're waiting for feedback from the reviewers, and we need to make sure there's working group consensus on the changes. A follow-on point from that is the BPSec interop document is still in working group last call. Now, that's partially the chair's fault for not either resolving the working group last call consensus or not clicking the button, but I also have a reservation that I know BPSec had several discusses raised against it about interoperability, and I just want to make sure that the interoperability document hasn't been changed or doesn't need to change in order to resolve the BPSec IESG discusses. I'm sure Ed Bahrain has the answer to that, and if the answer, depending on the answer, we'll get that last call sorted. That document should be ready as far as I'm aware, and it may simply be a failing of the chairs to have pressed the correct button. Oh, let me see if I can work out how to do this. Go ahead, Ed.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So Ed Bahrain, APL. I have a slide in my presentation that talks about the interoperability suites, and we did do an update to it based on the comments coming out of the IESG review, and we think that it matches what the IESG review was asking for, but we would like the working group to take a look at it one more time.
Okay, so Rick again. So that seems to align with my statement that if everyone's happy with the updates that Ed has made, we should probably do the working group last call again pretty promptly and just get it into last call by the sound of it if we have the consensus. Do you agree, Ed? I think so. I've lost Ed again. Doesn't matter. So that would be the idea. We'll keep going. Okay, next slide. I'm talking to myself. So we've also got some new documents or some new proposals for documents, which is great. 3 of them are security related, which is good because security is hard and it needs to be done properly. So Ed has stepped in with a proposal for a standard format for a template for a security context. This is designed to, and I'll let him speak in more depth, but as I understand it, this is his proposal for a bit of boilerplate to ensure that further security context documents actually do capture all the bits and pieces that BPSec requires. Following on from that, Brian Sipos has got a cozy security context he wishes to discuss, which sounds great. So that is the cozy, for those not in the loop, is the CBOR security encapsulation recommendations. And I'm sure Brian will get into more detail. And also, and I'll let him cover what I'm not 100% sure what ACME stands for, but again, Brian is going to talk about node ID validation to do with, I think it's TLS and X509, but I wish to be corrected. And as a follow-on piece, Brian also has a proposal to do with DTN neighbor discovery. So that's being slotted in at the end of the agenda. As usual, jumping on to the agenda again, the first 3 topics are really the most important ones, and if they overrun, I am very happy to let them run over a little bit. If it starts to get massively late, I'll pull the line on them. The new stuff is useful, and I've sort of prioritized them. If we run out of time for the neighbor discovery proposal, I'm very sorry, Brian, we'll have to move it forwards, but I think we have time for it, and we're going to try and leave some time at the end for an open mic if anyone else wants to raise anything else. So I realize I've been waffling for a bit. Does anyone wish to bash that agenda? Oh, I have a comment in the chat. No, that was an agreed from it. No. I'm taking that as a no to the agenda bash. So I will now. So Scott, you have 2 options. You can either share your screen or I can show your slides and try and do the next. I would prefer you to share.
Oh, well, I can attempt that.
The only reason I say that is I can watch if I share your slides, I can't see the screen to see who's chatting. It makes sharing a bit harder. Give it a try. If it doesn't work, I'm happy to share. I'm happy to share anyway.
Okay, I have my, I've not practiced doing that.
Okay, so
what do I do? I have the slides up in PowerPoint. What do I do to
in
share?
the left-hand column, near the
Yeah.
top where you requested to speak, I think there's a button which requests to present.
Okay.
There we go. And if I click yes, or try clicking, what's this have? All slots with requested media already. Oh, I have to hang up. And then there we go. You should
I
be
see.
sharing.
All right. Yes. Okay. Good. So you can see my screen, which is that. Let me bring this up, and you should now be able to see that. How's that?
I currently see nothing. Does anyone else see anything?
Ha.
Scott
That's unfortunate.
Screen.
All right. Let me try. How about if you see? How about now? Do you see it now?
I'm actually seeing nothing and seeing 0 kilobits per second. So I don't know. I will, as a backup, I will try. Oh,
weirdly, when I look at it in the little monitor, I saw it just a moment ago. It flashed away. Okay, let me try share your screen. Let me try application window.
okay.
Because it does looks like you're sharing everything. The application thinks you're sharing, but there is no content coming through. I think that's.
I'm switching over to sharing the application window, but so maybe it just needs to know what my applications are. If I do that, can it find that application? Yes.
Oh.
How about that?
Someone is binging. Yes, that's there. That's good. I've got.
Okay. It takes several mystical incantations, but it can be done. All right. Now, if I do this, is that better or worse?
That's better. That's now just the slides.
All right. Good. All right. I will
Good.
move as quickly as I can. Shall I start now?
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, go.
Okay.
Go.
I've got, I think, 11 slides here. The summary is this, that the BPVIS specification has been reviewed. There's been a lot of email exchange with the area directors on discusses and comments. There's a draft that was posted a few months ago, draft 25, that I think reflects the points of agreement. There are a couple of small additional revisions that IAN has asked for, and one revision proposed by Magnus that I was not able to post in BPVIS 26 because the blackout period had started. That draft is ready to go. I can post it as soon as the blackout period ends. There are several slides, several issues remaining that I think require a consensus decision by the D10 working group. I think all of the other issues have been discussed on the mailing list, and I don't propose to review all of them because they all seemed to me to be things that were that did not require working group revision. They were editorial in nature. The ones that I think are technical in nature are these, and so we can review them, and if we can reach consensus in real time, that's great, and if not, then we need to do that over the mailing list. The first one is the one that Magnus commented on kind of extensively in one of the recent emails, which is about the registration policy for the bundle and block processing control flags, whether that the registration policy should be standards action or whether it should be changed back to being standards action or not. The blue text here, and this is the convention I'm following in these slides, the blue text is the area director's words, and the response here is, this is taken from Magnus's email. And I am, content either way. We can talk about this now or revisit it on email. Rick, which would you like to do? I've got like 8 of these.
So my thought is that I'd like if somebody wants to get to the mic line now and make a comment, I would be very happy to hear it. I have a mild concern that the working group list is quiet, and that the clock is ticking and we're taking a lot of time to reach some consensus. So I think we have the active participants here now. Well done, everyone who's in horrible time zones for this meeting. And I'm really interested, if anyone has a strong opinion, this is a really good time to get out. Obviously, final consensus must be determined on the mailing list, but I'd like to have some of the discussion now, if that makes sense.
That sounds great to me. On most of these, I personally have no opinion one way or the other. I think on this one, either of the options looks fine to me. Either go ahead and tighten as was proposed in the discuss, or
so in which case I'm going to jump in and say, Magnus, this was your comment. What are you trying to, can you very briefly summarize what you're making, the comment you're making here?
Well, I just trying to say I see there's two possible way forward in regards to especially the IRTF aspect of it, and either make it clear that, okay, I mean, we had some discussion, I think, almost a year ago about certain aspects about IRTF, etc. But I mean, the fact is, this registry is joint between Standard Protocol version 6 and 7. And that's part, I think, of where we're a little bit fussy, or saying where I feel a little bit uncertain. And me personally, I think I have a preference for option 2, because I think that's good enough, and it doesn't seem that we stomp on BP6 requiring suddenly IETF approval for any extensions anyone would like to do to BP6, even if this is the primary group, so to say. But yeah.
Okay, so my understanding of, I think it was IETF106 where we went over this, is the consensus in the room was number 2. So we go to specification required. We had a long email conversation on the mailing list where the IRTF, I can't remember his exact position, but it was the IRTF AD equivalent, was quite happy to yield control of the IANA registration for specification required. So I don't think this is an issue, and I think we should take this one to the list just for, and say, I'll make a note to ask on the list that point 2, I think, is where we were with consensus. Does anyone have any objection on this? I'm just watching this list. Yeah, no, that's fine. There's a side chat going on. Go on to the next slide.
Okay, it's good.
Yep.
This is a discuss from Alexey's review, and this is, I don't have any response here. This is just is the TCP convergence layer protocol, TCP-CL version 4, mandatory to implement for every BP node? And of course, we can say it's mandatory to implement in the BP specification. That in itself doesn't cause anything to happen, but we can say that it's required and make sure that people know about it.
Okay, so me with my chair hat on, I thought the point of having a layered model where a convergence layer was part of a lower layer protocol was that TCP-CL was a canonical example and a preferred interoperability testing convergence layer, but wasn't mandatory to implement for every BP node.
I think there was an argument that it needed to be mandatory to implement because BP itself has no congestion control, and this would provide congestion control. I think that's a valid argument, particularly if you're running BP over the internet. If you're not running BP over the internet, and in fact you will not be running over the internet much of the time because it's running on space protocols, then it seems a little draconian to require that the TCP convergence layer protocol be part of the implementation of a BP node that is running on a spacecraft on its way to Jupiter.
Okay, Scott, in Magnus, you're about to say something?
Yeah, yes, I think you can definitely preface this with saying it's must if it's on over the internet protocol or something like that. It's either of the versions, and make that saying that at least have a starting point for a controlled convergence layer. But I think that's nothing stronger than that. And I mean, Alexey's discuss was not binding. I think he was. I think we had more interesting aspects of his original discuss is the retry strategies and all those things, which is separate. But maybe you're coming to that.
Oh, no, that's right. That was the other reason that TCP was going to. He thought TCP was going to be mandatory.
Okay.
And go ahead.
We've got one more person in the queue, so I thought I'd just let Stuart step in and get his point before we close this up. Go ahead, Stuart. I think he's just stepped out of the queue at that point. I think I may have just ejected him by mistake. Sorry, go ahead, Scott. We'll.
Well,
oh no, you are there, Stuart. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so I have had to run over one-way links, and that did not permit me to use TCP. What about folks who have that situation?
I think that's an excellent point. I think here I think the objection that would be raised would be, okay, in that case, what do you do to initiate retransmission of lost data? And I think the answer is that we do that with various convergence layer mechanisms, and one of those that will be standardized is TCP, but others are possible. And I think that would be a good resolution to this, but I leave it to the working group.
Okay, Brian, go ahead. Yeah, that's thanks, Brian. Magnus, go on.
Okay, shall we move on?
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Let me make a note of that. You move. Oh, sorry, Magnus, you wanted to say something?
Well, I was just gonna say that. I mean, I think reasonable text for scoping the interoperability requirement, and I think that's. I mean, we know that TCP convergence layer is both the blueprint and, in certain cases, it's a very good fallback basics for as long as you can fulfill it, and that sounds like what you're going here with. So I'm happy.
So the question really, Scott, do you think you have enough steer to craft some words for this, or do you want to start a discussion on the list about it?
I will craft some text. I will put it in the next draft, next edition of the Internet Draft, and we can iterate on it. I think I get the sense of what we've been saying, and if that's captured in the notes, then I'll just work in the notes.
Brilliant. Thank you. If anyone feels strongly about it, strongly worded email to the mailing list is the next step for this point. Carry on, Scott.
That's right. Strongly worded email to the mailing list. Okay. This is a general question. What do we do about storms of status reports, which is a thing people have been concerned about for a long time? And in particular, what is proposed here is that we implement a mechanism that smoothly enables a node to discard a bundle that seems to be a possibly damaging bundle, and do it in a way that is conformant to the rest of the specification. And what that would be is overriding the bundle lifetime, so that the bundle simply expires and goes away in the normal and well documented fashion. That seems to me to be a relatively unobtrusive and straightforward way to deal with bundles that need to be removed from the system for a number of reasons. One would be it's that there's a storm of status reports. Another would be that the node that has the bundle simply is running out of buffer space and needs to do some triage to get rid of bundles that already exist and can't do it because the bundle lifetimes are too long. I think it's, of course, like anything else, it's power that would need to be used judiciously, but I think providing that the authorization to wield that sort of power in a node, doing so formally is better than letting people make that sort of thing up on their own surreptitiously. So I like this way of going forward. I think it's a significant technical thing that requires the agreement of the working group, I think.
Okay, so Scott, just for Rick again here, just for my own sanity, what is being proposed is text in the document to formally state that for administrative or operational reasons, a bundle processing agent may ignore the requested lifetime of a bundle and just throw it away because it needs to.
I would say it very slightly differently. Rather than ignore the requested bundle lifetime, revise the requested bundle lifetime to a different number, so that the normal lifetime expiration and processing thereupon is what happens, so that we don't things don't disappear without any traceability at all.
Okay, so when you say revise, that's revise within the internal pipelines of the bundle processing agent, or you mean rewriting the primary block when it retransmits? And how does that affect BPSec and crypto?
And that's why I say in the text here, I say override, and it's a better way of saying it than revise. I definitely would not propose to change the lifetime in the bundle in the primary block. I would propose only to say that, oh, I know that the requested bundle lifetime is so and so, but as I process it here on my node, that lifetime is going to be this.
Okay. Yeah. Yep. Speaking personally, I think that's a really elegant solution. Anyone else? Anyone has, again, if anyone has a strong objection, can I say take it to the list as a thread on the mailing list saying I don't like this or I do like this? That would be really helpful. Oh, someone's in the queue. Ed, go ahead. Always a little bit of lag. Go ahead, Ed.
So, Ed Bahrain, APL. The question I have is, if you remove the bundle for this reason internal to the BPA, is there a new reason code that you would want to define to capture that condition?
There actually is a new reason code documented in the list of, I forget, status report reason codes or something called, I think it's bundle, I don't know, excised or something. It's bundle surplus, something like that. I can't remember what the text is.
Okay.
But actually, let me restate though. If we did it this way, the reason for deletion of the bundle would be lifetime expired, which is already documented, and that in fact might make that that additional contraindication reason code unnecessary.
Scott, I disagree with Rick here again. I'd really disagree with that. One is the lifetime recorded in the bundle primary block has expired. That's perfectly valid. The other example is this block is valid for 100 years, but after 26 seconds, an intermediate BPA threw it away for internal reasons, and that's a different reason code.
Okay, so we can set the text up such that if the lifetime expiration is due to expiration of an overriding lifetime, then the reason code will be that other reason code rather than lifetime expired. Happy to do that.
Yeah, or a subcode or something like that. But I do see them as if I was collecting, if I'm doing my sort of administrative logging, I'd want to know that these were two different reasons for bundles not being delivered to their final destination.
Sounds fine. Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So, do you want to keep going? I'm watching the clock.
Okay. Next one. The BPSec extensions. This is Benjamin's discussed. We've been over a couple of times. Under what circumstances is BPSec mandatory to implement? And Magnus had an assessment for this one, saying that a protection profile needs to be normative reference, and we also don't have automatic key exchange. Are we okay with making BPSec strongly recommended, or is it required in every node?
So, I don't have a record of any consensus on this. Formal consensus of this. This is me with my chair hat on. I think I shall ask this formally on the list and not cause a discussion now, because I think this is going to take a little longer to work on. Okay. I believe, as on the second point from Magnus's assessment, again with my chair hat on, I don't believe automatic end-to-end key exchange fits with the model of DTN. I think we're happy to put it on the working group's to-do list. It might require rechartering, and that's a discussion between the chairs and the AD, etc., longer term. So, and given we did the early SEC AD, the early SEC review, and they were happy with it at the time, I don't think we should open the can of worms about automatic key exchange. I think we should let it roll and understand that it's something we may want to put on the charter at a later date.
I think that's fine. We have talked about key exchange protocols in a couple of earlier meetings. And I think it's one of the things that were proposed for the charter changes.
Yeah, and they were very interesting proposals as well. So, and I'd love to come back to them. Go ahead, Magnus. Sorry.
Yes, no, but it's. I mean, my assessment here is only saying that there's an RFC in IETF that says that for modern new security solutions, etc., automatic key exchange is required. And I'm just saying that, to my understanding, the SecDs is not going to be stick on that requirement towards you at this point in time. And that with the expectation that the working group will eventually get around to providing a solution for this in the future.
Absolutely, and I take your point, and I would like to suggest back to you and also to the SEC guys that this is a tough problem in DTN, and we can't just say, oh, just do a key exchange, it'll be fine, because we don't actually know how to move the keys. We have some interesting work, but we'd like to do it properly. Anyway, let's move on.
Okay, next. This is discussed too from Benjamin. How do we tell whether an endpoint is singleton or not? In the IPN scheme, we've revised the definition of the IPN scheme to say that all the IPN scheme endpoints are singleton. We don't say that about the DTN scheme endpoints. Do we need some definition of the syntax and semantics of the DTN scheme that indicates whether or not the endpoint is a singleton?
Okay, I'll bite.
I know.
Yeah, you and I and several others have had discussions about this before, where without defining everything about a DTN addressing scheme in all its gory details, are we going to block BP-BIS forever? And I think we have all skirted around the idea of defining an abstract interface that a naming scheme needs to have, and it seems to me that a URI scheme suitable for use in DTN must have some way of indicating whether an endpoint ID is unique or not, or whether it is a node ID for example, IPN, :0 is the node ID.
Right.
DTN, not so sure. And I suppose, yeah, go ahead.
I can propose a mechanism for this and put it in the next draft and have that be part of the discussion.
Yes, I'm happy for you to do that. Can you raise it as when you have put some proposed text together? Can I ask you raise that as a question on the list to say, this bit of text specifically I have put in because I think it addresses this, just to kick off that discussion, to give us a focused thread for that discussion. Is that okay, Scott?
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, number 6. This should be easy. Can we, right now the spec says that there are up to 256 scheme types that are, for which we have codes for BP. Is there any reason to limit that? And I think the answer is there's no real good reason to limit it. And we can just say that everything above 255 is open for private usage as Magnus proposes.
Rick again. I put a proposal back on the list about this, but I'll raise it in person. I would go for a number higher than 255. My concern being that with CBOR you have an infinite number space effectively. If with that infinite number space, if the vast amount of it is private use, you can get a propagation of private use URI scheme codes that proliferate and become de facto standards just because a major manufacturer has started shipping their own special scheme, and it never gets standardized within the IETF. So my argument would be is if you could force the numbers to start at 3-byte encoding in CBOR. So there is actually a penalty for using the private experimental space, and that we sort of nudge people towards saying, hey, bring it to the IETF, get it standardized, get it peer reviewed, would be better. That would be my suggestion.
Oh, okay. So up until, say, I don't know, 64,000 or something, those will be not available for private use, but above that they are.
That would be my suggestion. That's personally my suggestion. I'm interested in other people's thoughts. It's that nudge tactic of saying, try and join in. You know, don't go building giant networks using private code space because it's easy.
Okay, this sounds fine to me. Shall we just keep that in the note, and I'll mark that into the spec and see if there's any objection. That
sounds great. That's a good way forward.
Okay, we're close to the end. The last two are just comments. They're not discusses. One of Benjamin's comments was, "What's why is bundle age in microseconds when bundle lifetime is in seconds? They should be in the same denomination." I think that's right, and in fact, I've had people in NASA say, "Oh, you know, for some tracing, we would like the time tags for status reports to be in milliseconds." So my preference, I guess, would be that all of these time magnitudes be expressed in the same units, seconds, milliseconds, microseconds, nanoseconds. My preference is for seconds, actually, but I think milliseconds is not too bad. I'd like to have it not be any more precise than that, because a lot of the clocks we're looking at, the milliseconds are nonsense anyway, and it takes up a lot of space to, you know, why transmit all that. However, what's the working group feel? Or do we care because of that?
I'm allowing people to join the queue before I state my opinion. Go ahead, Adam. There's always a little bit of lag. Adam, you should have the mic.
Yep. Do you got me now?
Yeah, you're very quiet.
Oh, why is everything broken? So I would say I would prefer seconds, but that is being on the naive approach of this is DTN. It's delay. If you're measuring in microseconds, it's going to get quite large. And if you're going to get delay and you're going to have milliseconds, then what was the point? That's just my 2 cents on it.
Okay. Go ahead, Stu.
Yeah, I don't even know what absolute time means when we take into account special relativity.
Oh, don't go there, please. Go ahead, Brian.
This is Brian Cephas, RKF. I agree with the seconds as well. And if a special application has used for a finer timer, you could always add a private extension block for doing finer grain tracing.
Thanks, Brian. I'm Rick speaking personally. I'm for seconds as well. If you want to do timing of the processing of the pipeline within your bundle processing agent itself, that's fine. Go do nanosecond timing. That's fine. But yeah, I'm in a rough agreement with everyone else. It's seconds. We're delay tolerant. If you're in milliseconds, if you're in microseconds, you may as well push IP packets. You know.
Okay, so are we sort of generally agreed that we'll stick with seconds in all cases? Bundle age, lifetime, status report times, all the times denominated in seconds. I'm content with that. I just want to,
Well, Ronald on the chat Ronald Intervelt makes a very good point, which is the D in DTN can actually be for disruption as well as delay. So, Ronald, are you suggesting that in a disrupted network, when you have connectivity, it can be very fast and therefore a higher resolution timer is useful? Or
that's correct. That makes sense.
So is this a counter proposal, or should we, if Ronald doesn't jump to the mic, there we go. Go ahead, Ronald.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't thought about this a whole lot, but I thought milliseconds might be a nice middle ground.
Mm-hmm. Shall we take this to the list? I think people are starting to think out loud rather than having a strong opinion. I think this should be a list discussion. I will kick off an email unless someone else wants to jump in straight away.
Okay. What I will do is in the next edition, I'll make all of the denominations the same. I will guess tentatively that we're going to end up with everything being in milliseconds, because I think that there is some value in being able to track that level of precision, and we can go back to seconds if there's consensus to do that.
That sounds very sensible. Again, like my previous request, when you have some proposed text, could you start a separate thread on the mailing list just so people have a chance to jump in with an opinion if they have a strong one?
Okay, sure.
Thanks, Scott.
Absolutely. Last one. Are the previous node, bundle age, and hop count extensions mandatory to implement? At the moment, I think they're. We don't say that support for these is mandatory in any bundle protocol agent, but Benjamin's perception is that they feel like key components of the protocol.
Okay, Rick speaking personally again. This is where I ask questions about the meaning of an extension. So if it's an extension, to me, as a native English speaker, that implies it's optional. Because if it wasn't an extension, it would just be in the mandatory primary block. Is that the intention?
There's a distinction here in that the primary block is immutable. These other things are mutable over time, and they might be mandatory and yet mutable, right? These are different dimensions.
Yeah. Okay. Good point. Go ahead, Magnus. Sorry,
Yeah, I would also see that. I mean, I think Ben's is on something here. Is the question: is the does the protocol work without these functions? And that's, I think, might be what you need to ask yourself here.
And I would say that the protocol definitely can work without these extensions. Is that true? Previous node, you might not actually be able to make the protocol work without previous node. You can make the protocol work without bundle age and hop count.
Yeah, but at some risk. I mean, hop count,
Yeah.
etc. They are there to prevent routing loops, etc., to make the whole network break down if you get one or things like that. So
that's right.
I don't think you deploy this DTN safely without these functions, and that's, I think, is my worry, and that's why maybe they need to be mandatory. But that's for your working group to assess now. But I raised the question and I think which
okay,
is Ben's point.
Rick with chair hat on, watching the time. We'll take this to the list because I think this is a longer discussion than we can have here. But I think I take your point, Magnus. This is now I understand what we're talking about. This needs to be discussed.
I would point out this was a comment, not a discuss, but it is a significant issue.
Yeah. And
that's the end of my slide, so I'm all done.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Scott. Let me make a quick note that I'm going to raise that.
I have one addition to say here. I chatted briefly with Ben, and he encouraged the authors to at least bi-weekly remind him about the DTN documents until response. But
okay.
be clear what you want from him, and so state explicitly what you want him to do. But please go ahead and remind him when you want some feedback from him, and then keep on reminding him so he doesn't forget.
Okay, noted. I think that might be an action for the chairs as well. I'll put something in my calendar, so once a week I'll send him an email to say, how are you doing? Anyway, jumping back to me, I will grab the screen. I want to share my screen. Back to the agenda. So next up, can you see that? I know because I'm not sharing it. How do I share? Yes, I wish to share my screen. I seem to be unable to share my screen. Anyway, doesn't matter. Thank you very much, Scott. I'm going to bin you out from the presentation at the moment. Next, we have Ed on your BPSec updates. So, Ed, would you attempt to? You should be able to take control. Does that seem to be working for you, Ed?
Can you see my screen?
Not yet, but that may be me. Can anyone else see Ed's screen?
I do see it.
Oh, it's me.
Okay, so I will, Ed Bahrain, APL. I wanted to give a brief update on the current status of BPSec. The summary link points to where we are in terms of IESG reviews. Generally speaking, we had one yes, several no objections, and we did have a few discusses. I'm not going to go through each discuss and each comment because I think at the end of the day, there were something like 10 or 11 discusses and maybe 80 comments. Many of the comments were associated with the security area director, and all of them, I believe, were addressed in versions of the document. So we went from BPSec version 18 to BPSec version 22. So what I wanted to walk through was a series of questions that came out of that, and I believe these are the ones that are open, and many of these are I believe, relatively straightforward. So the first question, and this is a little bit overlapping with some of the things Scott had mentioned, is should, much like there's a question of should BPSec be mandatory to implement for BP, another question along that line is, should there be one security context that is mandatory to implement for all BPSec implementations? we defined a interoperability security context, and we put text in the document in section 9.1, which talked about the idea that networks should themselves mandate which security contexts are needed for that network, and that if there wasn't one, a default could be the interoperability context. But otherwise, it allows different nodes and deployments to pick different security contexts given their context. So one question that comes from this is that text sufficient, or is there one security context that must be implemented for all networks everywhere all the time? And my recommendation is at the bottom, which is I don't recommend that, but it's up to the working group.
Okay, sorry about that. I was reloading because I lost all video. Rick here. Ed, I'm conscious of time. Can you raise that question as a single topic on the mailing list, including your recommendation? Because I think this needs to be discussed, much like the other one.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Question number 2, which also I think Scott had mentioned related to key exchange. Can we standardize BPSec absent a key exchange protocol? In the document in section 6, we talk about the fact that there are lots of ways of doing key management and key establishment. Many of them are based on the capabilities and the operating conditions of the underlying network. I don't think that BPSec as a specification should be specifying or mandating a specific key management protocol. BPSec is a container for carrying cryptographic material, and that's it. So I don't think that there should be any change here, but I wanted to bring that to the working group.
Rick speaking personally, I'm in complete agreement. It's about securing, not about the key management. Again, if anyone else has any strong opinions, please take it to the mailing list because I'm watching the time, but I'm taking quiet assent as no change required.
The third question was, do we, and this was coming from a comment from Benjamin, Security AD, which was, he was initially surprised that we did not allow what he called nested signatures or multiple signatures on the same target. I believe we addressed that in the comments, which is that you can run into difficulties associated with, now I have multiple signatures on a target, which one do I believe? And that certainly pushes complexity into individual nodes to say, if I have many signatures, and is it one that needs to pass? Is it 3 or 4? It is complicated, and we think that the existing BIBs and BCBs and BPSec don't need to be updated for this case.
Okay, so Rick again, personal question. Can you see it being feasible that in the future someone could produce an extension that does manage this within the framework of BPSec?
I do, and I do in 2 ways. Certainly one is to define a security context which allows multiple results that even could be added along the way if that was a desired behavior. But the other is, and there's another slide on this coming up, that you can define additional security blocks. BPSec provides the conditions under which that is possible. The BIB and the BCB are really meant to be a one-to-one mapping for these individual cases. If somebody wanted to do something additional where there is a many-to-many mapping, I think that someone should define that as a separate block with separate processing rules instead of trying to capture 2 very different behaviors in a single security block.
Okay, understood. So yeah, that answers my question. It's possible, but it needs to exist externally from. I mean, it can inherit some of the behaviors and commonality with BPSec as it stands, and it's not excluded, but it can be done separately. Okay, I'm happy with that. Question to the floor. Does anyone feel strongly about this? Again, my suggestion would be take it to the list if you do. I think, Ed, you should proceed with your current recommendation unless somebody feels really strongly about this.
Okay. The next question that came up, this was a comment as well from the security area director, which was, do you consider a security encryption over multiple blocks? So would you define an integrity block that has a single signature that is calculated over 2, 3, or 4 extension blocks or over the entire bundle itself? Our answer to that is similar to the answer to question number 3. My recommendation is similar, is the idea that BIB and BCB are meant to be single target services. If you want a multi-target service, that's probably a different block, and we have a section 10, for how those could be defined. And if you really wanted to clarify anything in the text, you could say that BIBs and BCB provide single target integrity and single target confidentiality, and that is separate from multi-target integrity and multi-target confidentiality.
Okay, so this is in some ways similar. Sorry, Rick again. Some ways similar to the previous answer, which is we are. BPSec talks about one-to-one integrity and signature, one-to-one blocks. It occurs to me that the bundle-in-bundle encapsulation is again another way of adding integrity across an entire payload. So I'm happy with just the clarifying text. Speaking personally.
Agreed. And Stuart just put together or added a comment which said, please make sure that we do not preclude multiple signatures. And just to speak to that for a moment on question number 3, the issue is right now the BPSec says that the same security operation cannot be done more than once in a bundle. I think that's the sticking point, is to not have 2, 3, or 4 BIBs that are independent, added by different nodes that target the same security target. And so, that right now is not allowed in BPSec. And the question is that something that we do want to allow in BPSec? But I can add that when I post the question to the mailing list.
I suggest you take that to the mailing list and we can have a deep discussion over impact on complexity of implementation as part of. There's always a balancing act between, particularly when it comes to security technology, which is hard to get right, the balancing act between complexity of implementation and whether people actually bother to do it. So features versus complexity.
I'll completely agree. The 5th question is, where should we put bundle protocol reason codes? One thing that came out of our analysis was, if you choose to remove a bundle from the network based on a security-related reason, then you may want to add security-related reason codes. And a question that came up is, where is the right place to represent those security-related reason codes? There are 2 places that we thought of that you could put that information. One is in BPSec itself. The reason codes we thought of were bundle was discarded because it was missing a required security service. It had an unknown or unparsable or corrupt security service. It had more security than was expected, or it had a security service that failed, such as failed integrity, or it had conflicting services where the security blocks in a bundle violated BPSec rules. Alternatively, it could go into a security context template that defines the reasons that should be adopted by all security contexts.
Go ahead, Scott.
I just wanted to strongly advocate that that these new reason codes, wherever they do end up, not be things that we put into the BP BIS the main bundle protocols specification, there's no way we're going to be able to anticipate all of these. My preference would be to add them in the documents for the security contexts that cause those reason codes to be raised. But I don't feel strongly about that.
Okay, go ahead, Stuart.
Just another reason code you might want is security service prohibited by local policy.
Mm-hmm. Good point. So, Rick, speaking personally, I agree with Scott that if there are a set of generic security-related reason codes that apply no matter what the security context, then I think they should be defined in BPSec. So that might be generic security failures, such as you have here, i.e. missing security service, one is required but is not there, etc., etc. I think specific security context related reason codes should probably go in the security context defining document. And I think this actually comes all the way back to the IANA reason code registry discussion that applies to BPBIS. So once we get that squared away properly, so expert review, then these can all just start allocating off each other, and IANA should be able to pick this up during ORF 48 or at whatever point in this they actually put these things together. Okay. Scott, sorry, Scott, did you have a comment? No, I've just not muted you. Okay, go on, Ed.
A question, and we're almost to the end. Question number 6. There was a question as to whether security context parameters should be encoded as a CBOR map instead of an array. The discussion is here on the slide. My recommendation is, even if there is an efficiency there, and I'm not convinced that there is, it's not a very large efficiency, and I think we should keep it as is, but wanted to check with the working group.
Okay, so Rick, speaking personally, one compelling reason I can see to using a map is that it matches the logical structure. So you have a dictionary of parameters and values. So logically, it is a map, a dictionary, an indexed data structure. Yes, an array may be a very efficient way to record it, but that may not be a strong enough reason to start changing a protocol at this point. Go ahead, Scott.
Ready an array, and so I think changing it to a map, I would, speaking as an implementer, I would advocate that we stick with the smallest number of keyboard structures we can get away with.
Yeah, understood that efficiency is important in these places. It's someone with a lot of CBOR experience, and I know Brian's been looking at this quite heavily recently. I would be surprised if an integer indexed map of values is any more or less efficient than an array of index comma value tuples. And Brian, as if by magic, wishes to speak.
Does have a very slight space efficiency, but it runs into its own separate other issues of canonicalization and other things.
Sorry, a map or an array? Which way are you suggesting?
I would say keep as is, because it's not so compelling to switch to a map.
Okay. Go on, Ed.
I have my own question as to with the map and canonicalization as well, particularly if we have security contexts that calculate a signature over the parameters themselves.
Okay. Okay, I was playing devil's advocate, so I suggest you propose what you're doing, which is no change, and answer Benjamin, and we'll prod him to see if he can lift his discuss on this one. again, if anyone has any serious thoughts about this, please jump on the mailing list and send a strongly worded email saying that we've got this wrong. Okay. So I'm looking at the time, Ed. Do you have much else? Yes.
2 more.
Cool.
The other is, should BPSec force integrity of non-block type specific data? This is it required that a BIB or a BCB sign their security ID, security parameters, and so on? The recommendation is this is a really good idea and it should be done, but BPSec itself should not mandate it, although we can add non-normative text to explain why it is a good idea.
So Rick here, I think this is classic text that should go in the security considerations of the document. This is, do this, it's a really good idea style text.
I agree.
Yeah.
And then the last is, should BPSec reserve some common security context parameter and result IDs? In BPSec, currently, it says that the definition of that mapping key value of security results and key value mapping of parameter IDs is solely in the auspices of the security context itself. So security context 1, parameter 1 could be different than security context 2, parameter 1. And the question was, is there value in reserving a couple of IDs at the front that would be common for all security contexts or not, such that you could say, for example, IDs 0 to 15 must be interpreted the same for all security contexts in BPSec, but once you get to 16 and greater, it would be based on whatever the specific context is.
Okay, so my question, Ed, is can you, off the top of your head, name 3 things you would consider common between 3 different security contexts?
So the ones that have come up in the past are things like initialization vectors or salt values or things like that, and I could probably come up with exactly 3, and whether it is a great efficiency to prevent that from being stated over and over again in individual security contexts. I don't feel strongly about this.
I would suggest you take this to the list with a default position of probably not, because it could be seen as just making work for ourselves. But I think this is a real list question myself. And we'll try and get some resolution on this quickly. But I think this is a big topic, and I'm watching the clock.
All right, that is all of my questions. So
Brilliant.
I'm done.
Thank you very much, Ed. So I'm going to move very quickly on to Brian. If you can try and work out how to magic. Oh, sorry, someone. Brian's in the queue. I'm just checking. Somebody raised a question. Yeah, so Magnus raised the point that the last couple of comments were actually comments, not discusses. So it's really up to us to, as the working group and the authors, to guide us on this, to just decide what we want and then tell Ben what we've decided, really. Okay. So, Brian, I'm allowing you to share your screen. Thank you very much, Ed. Go ahead, Brian. I hope this works for you. I'm going to have to reload my page because it never works for me.
Through, I hope. So my first 2 slides are just background boilerplate about TCP/CL motivations. Nothing's changed in these slides since the original presentations, so I'm going to skip over them for the sake of terseness. But the goal is to keep things as similar as possible to allow migration from v3. The last draft changes were based on IESG and AD feedback. Section 3 text was added to give some backgrounds and explanations of PKI environments and CA policy and session keeping policy. These are really just rationales for why the actual requirements are the way they are, and they don't have any changes to the actual protocol itself. I added a completely separate draft that'll be discussed a bit later about how does the CA actually validate that I own a node ID that I claim to own for the sake of PKI. And there have been no further comments after this. As was mentioned earlier, I think prodding the SecAD or the ISG security area folks is the last thing that needs to happen. There's one issue that was raised during the security review, and that is related to who has the obligation when you try to make a TCP/CL session and you get a session, but it's not with the peer you expected to get. So I can raise this as a working group question. If anybody has any near-term feedback or comments, I welcome it now. But this is my last slide on the TCP/CL topic, that the protocol has not changed, only adding explanatory text. Any comments or questions? I don't hear anything.
This is Ed Bahrain. Yeah, I don't hear Rick either. I guess I had just a quick question. So coming out of this...
Oh, I'm sorry, I had my mic turned off. I'm such an idiot. I've been talking away to myself for minutes. So I had to reload the screen because I lose the graphics. Executive summary of what I've been talking to myself about. TCP/CL, I think, is in a really good state. Can we take this final page discussion to the list? Because I think this will take longer than we've got, and it's going to eat into the next discussion, time-wise. Can people please reread the latest version? Because although nothing normative has changed, some text has changed, and just to make sure that we're all happy with it, although I think we trust Brian and he's done a really nice job. Thank you. That's all I was going to say.
All right.
Thanks, Brian. Sure, I'm pushing forwards with the time on this one. Sorry.
Yes, absolutely.
And you get another chance in a minute anyway. So, Ed, do you want to jump in with yours, please?
And this next... Okay, I am sharing.
I can see this time. Something is working.
And this is the interoperability security context.
Yep.
So the essentially there have been no changes to the version 01, which has been up, and we updated it I think in February or March, and this was in response to requests out of the IESG review that we put together an interoperability security context. The BIB, we've named it BIB IOP. I wanted to put IOP in there to say that this is for interoperability only, although I don't feel strongly about that. The security results for this, it's a HMAC 256 SHA 256, and it has a single result, which is the expected HMAC. And then for confidentiality, it's AES Galois Counter Mode 256, and it carries an IV and authentication tag. I guess if there are any questions to the working group on this, it would be, are there other, do we think that these are the correct cipher suites, cipher suite for AES GCM and just integrity mechanism for HMAC SHA that we should be using for interoperability testing of BPSec?
Rick, speaking personally, no. I think those look like perfectly reasonable things to go with. I have a question over the IOP name. I wonder whether it's surplus. I know these are meant to be the interop security contexts, but is there would there be another HMAC 256 SHA 256 security context that was not the IOP one? It just seems a bit surplus. I wonder whether you can just specify this is the interoperability context and use these two, so people could say, well, I'm actually just going to use that anyway. It works perfectly well for me in my security domain.
So I don't feel strongly about it. The only thing I would say is that if we were to remove the IOP and have it just be those that could also be used for deployment, we might want to go and update it to our other security recommendations, such as talking about securing other information in the BIB and the BCB with integrity signatures over the parameters and the other security results and so on.
Okay, I'm going to let Brian jump in, but then I'm joining the queue. Go ahead, Brian.
So my feelings on these contexts are that they're fine from the perspective of proof of testing, like Ed said, but I agree that they should be marked in some way that these contexts have no parameters and no really necessarily wider use outside of a very closed situation.
Okay.
That's then I think that's perfectly fine.
I agree with you here, Brian. Rick, again, speaking personally, I think we may have misunderstood the point of an interoperability security context. And I think the steer from the security directorate was to fully define a security context that would be expected to be implemented by most things so that it could be used fairly interoperably. I'll give this a try because it probably will be implemented, rather than for testing, here is a dummy or a mock security context with just enough to check my code. And that was why I raised the question about IOP. But I might be out in the woods on this one.
So jumping in here, I share, my understanding of the goal of an interoperability is to have one as saying, oh, this is expected to work, that you have the keys, so to say, and can parameterize the context. And from that perspective, most of the parameters should be given, etc., and it should be possible. So basically, you just need the keys to match to the claimed source identity so that you could decrypt it, etc., and verify it.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Magnus on this. I'm watching the clock, sorry, these sessions are too short. Can we take this one to the list? In fact, I will make a note myself to take this to the list.
So totally fine, and if we want to rev this and just call it a default security context and put in additional items to make it operationally relevant, we can certainly do that in very short time.
Well, that would be my suggestion, and I'm glad to hear you think it would be short. The question is whether my personal understanding is correct and ties in with the rest of the group. Hence, I'll take it to the list. Keep going, Ed.
That's all I have on the security context.
Excellent. In which case, the agenda says you had something about security templates. Do you want to cover that very quickly now?
So the real question that I have on this, while I update the share screen again, is there so the question to the working group is there value in having a security context template at all? And what we presented here in just one or two slides is this might be a place for more specific guidelines for writing security contexts specific policy, canonicalization considerations, usage and error handling, perhaps even a common template for a table of contents and things that must be addressed, and then whether or not you have common parameters, result types, or reason codes. And as an example of the kind of normative or at least good practice information that could be in there is if we were to look through the life cycle of a security operation, regardless of what security context you're using, your security blocks in a bundle will go through this life cycle, and make sure that that is defined someplace so that you can say your security context must consider each of these possibilities, and whether or not there's value in putting together things like security reason codes generic if they're not in BPSec, and then notable events coming out of such a security operations lifecycle. So the question to the working group, and please take a look at the ID that's been posted, is whether having all of this information in one place as an informational RFC is useful to authors of security context in the future.
I will reiterate that. Please look at this. This is an interesting concept. It affects the workload of the working group. I mean, it involves creating an informational document, which we haven't done for a while, but it may have some benefits. Again, for expediency, let's make this a list discussion, if people don't mind. Ed, can I ask you to kick that off with a little summary of, I think this is a good idea because ...
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, Brian, let's share. Let's skip on to you. Sorry, it's got rushed, but I think it was worth making sure we went through BPBIS and BPSec discusses because we've got to get those cleared. I can't hear anyone.
I see.
Oh.
So the motivation for this context was really just putting my money where my mouth was in terms of what I had just said about the interoperability context that had been proposed, that it's not bad, but it is lightweight. And the point of proposing a COSI context is that COSI is a quite broad definition of how to do a lot of different types of security in a standard way, and also in a way that is made by definition to be done in a constrained environment. And the point here is, at the end, not to reinvent the wheel, that COSI does a lot of things and does a lot of things in maybe not the best way or the most efficient way, but it's a standard way. So the point here is that this is all being done in the existing BPSec structure. This is a BPSec context. It's doing everything in the way that BPSec says it ought to be done, but it's doing the parameter encoding in a way that is extensible. And the point here is this last item: to inherit the future gains that come from future COSI work. Now, this is not supposed to be something that is going to be across the board general use. I don't know that this necessarily represents a kind of a minimum to implement, but the intent here is that it is sort of internet applicable security that already exists. There are libraries, there are troubleshooting tools to deal with COSI messages. And the security contexts that are defined here are done in a way, again, to fit into the BPSec model. We are reusing COSI message tags as result type codes so that we're not inventing new code points here. And although COSI is extremely broad in its scope, this proposal has 2 required cipher suites, which are exactly the same as what has been prepared in that interoperability. So it doesn't represent a change in minimum scope, effectively, from that interoperability spec. And it has several recommended algorithms for PKI environments, which really aren't addressed by the interoperability draft currently. and key wrap, which is another important thing in a long-term internet-facing key use situation where you don't want to have to share content keys. One other thing that I think is kind of important, and Ed has mentioned this as a comment to be addressed in BPSec, is that there are consequences from the current behavior that's minimum specified by BPSec about being able to replay blocks, because right now BPSec doesn't mandate that signing or encrypted authenticated data covers the block metadata or the primary block. I feel that this is a pretty important thing, but in certain environments it might not be an important thing. But again, this whole COSI spec is geared towards public network facing requirements where you can't trust that everybody is going to be necessarily a good player, and you can't assume that you're going to be able to have distribution of a lot of these parameters. And so that's one item.
Sorry, so we got Ed in the queue. I'll let him jump in.
Go ahead.
There we go. So two things, Ed Brain, APL. The first is I was able to read this very, very briefly yesterday. I think it's a great idea. And my first question is, well, if this has more information in it, and COSI is a standard in this way, is this a better default use on the internet security context as opposed to building one separately that's just HMAC SHA and AES GCM? So
just to rephrase, your question is this a better replacement for your interop document?
If we want a default security context for use on the internet, which I believe is what the ADs were asking for, should we say we'll adopt COSI and wrap it as a security context, and that should be the internet default, or would the working group still like me to put a different one together for that?
Okay, so for expediency, as part of my email to the mailing list that I am going to send after this session, I will include that in the interop spec or COSI or test spec. That I'll include it on that mail, and we'll take that to the list if that's okay.
Yeah, that sounds great. And the point here also is that if there's a network or an operator that does care about these things, then absolutely they should define their security context as they need to. And this is made more for an operator that doesn't necessarily care. They just want to use what's available.
Which is a very important use case. It should be remembered. It's very easy for those of us in the aeronautical industry or very dedicated industries like that to say that's fine. We have customers who define their security specifications, but DTN, as we keep telling ourselves and others, has applicability beyond big industry and has applicability in the internet as a whole, particularly with IoT devices, and hence building on COSI, I can see personally as an important thing to be able to do and just say, use this, it has been thought about by smart people already. Okay.
Yep.
Thanks, Brian. Right, we have 5 minutes, well, 7 minutes left. So on the agenda, we still have, Brian's got some comments about ACME, and you've got DTN neighbor discovery proposal. Brian, I'm going to let you choose one and give you 5 minutes, but I'm going to ask one last question. When booking DTN meetings, the chairs have to select how long they want and how many sessions they want. And for the last couple of years, we have said 1 2-hour session is enough. Question to the list. Would a longer session help in future? Do people have things they'd like to say but feel that there's not time? I'm really pleased that this is a big session and there's lots of people, and Scott is, keep it quick, Scott, but go ahead.
More time would be good. We have there's a lot of things that we're contemplating in the charter. I think we've got a lot of things to talk about. So I think either multiple sessions or a longer session would be a good thing.
Okay, noted. So I believe IETF 109 is probably going to be virtual as well, but don't quote me on that. If it is, I will definitely ask for a longer slot. Be very quick, Brian. That's all I can say.
Yes, I will try. I'm focusing here on the neighbor discovery only because this is a DTN topic, not a ACME topic.
Okay.
But there were some results that came out of the 104 hackathon that had recommended that there was an implementation of discovery, and they said this really is an IP mechanism, but it really applies to DTN in general, and it happens to be over IP in this case. And there were also a couple of drafts earlier on in the DTN RG about dealing with embedding discovery mechanisms inside of a bundle itself. And there are also some work in the Manet area about neighbor discovery and algorithms to do this kind of stuff. So my questions to the working group are really a matter of, I know this is a charter item, but is it worth at this point dealing with this kind of thing at a bundle level and doing all the things that have to happen in a draft to be able to solidify some of these concepts, to be able to have a general purpose DTN neighbor discovery protocol? And one way of transporting a DTN neighbor discovery is over something like a UDP broadcaster multicast. There's a bunch of details in here about what that would involve, but it's just a general question of, does this seem like a sensible path to go down?
Okay, so Rick, jumping in with my chair hat on to start with. Yes, I believe this, and somebody's raised a comment, I better just check. Right, okay, so Ronald has raised a very good point. Ronald, do you want to jump to the microphone line in a second? So neighbor discovery and neighborhood discovery are both items that should be on the charter. I need to quickly check the charter myself. If they're not, they should be. I've lost the charter. I'm useless at times. I think this is good work. I think it's something we should be looking at. I think it's definitely something that should be discussed on the list, and I can only apologize for not organizing time better to get this in place. My personal feeling is there is things that there are aspects which should be happening at the bundle level in terms of discovering neighbors and building routing topologies, etc. With some background in Manet, NHDP is actually a fairly good protocol with a very weird encoding. Manet has spent a lot of time looking at ad hoc neighborhood discoveries, two-hop neighbors, that sort of stuff. And there's a lot to be said for not reinventing wheels. So yes, I am in general in favor. I'll let Ronald jump in now.
No, actually, I can say this on the list. Let Brian continue, please, with review on the few minutes that are remaining.
Okay, I was just going to reiterate what was just said about as much as possible. You know, these recent Manet RFCs have been, I believe, after some of these other drafts have occurred. So synthesizing algorithms that are well defined out of the Manet with encodings of BP-BIS could go a long way to not reinventing things.
So that reminds me of one last thing with my chair hat on and knowing that Ronald is the chair of Manet. Manet at the moment, correct me if I'm wrong, Ronald, is looking for, has a load of work that has been done historically and is looking for more participation. And given that given that Ronald is active in DTN as well as in Manet, and I'm active in Manet as well as DTN, we see that there's quite a lot of crossover. One of the discussions to be had is about the management. So I have had discussions with Ed and I've had discussions with Ronald about whether the AMA AMP work might whether the Manet working group actually has enough cycles at the moment to pick up some of that. And that's a question for the working group about whether they want to cling on to AMA or whether they want to help, sorry, not the architecture, but the protocol work, whether they're happy to help get that work done in Manet, whether they'd like to continue to see that work done in DTN. And equally, neighbor discovery is something where we can go to Manet and say, please help us. And hopefully we can help them in return. That's just my passing comment. So I'm also conscious that it's 13:39 in the UK, 12:39 UTC, and we finish at 12:40. So I'm going to open the mic for 1 minute if anyone has anything they want to add. Otherwise, I do apologize for the poor timing of this. I will book a longer session for the next one, and thank you very much for all the participants. Blue sheets are automatic. Please join the queue if you have any comments. Thank you, all the presenters.
Thank you very much for at least having a working first working group echo this meeting. So thank you, Rick.
Even though I muted myself for 5 minutes. Otherwise, thank you very much, everyone. I think, go ahead, Brian. Oh no, I just haven't muted you. Thank you very much, everyone. I think that's the end of the session. I will close it down in some way. Thank you very much for your attendance. Yeah, IETF109, probably virtual. If it's not, I'll see you in Bangkok. And hopefully this time next year we can actually meet in person. But mailing list, please use the mailing list, because it's not only a good way to have a conversation because you can think about what you're saying, it's also a record of that conversation for when someone comes back in 10 years and says, why did they do it that way? So please use the mailing list. Okay, thank you very much, guys. I'm going to shut this down and I will see you next, as everyone's off to Babel, apparently. I don't know how to shut this down. I don't know why. Anyway, thanks, guys. I'm getting a cup of tea.